So, how does a country actually plan its future? Not just for, next year, but for an entire decade. And what happens to that grand plan when a massive crisis, like a catastrophic earthquake, completely changes the game? Today, we're digging into how a nation's blueprint for its own cities is forced to evolve, sometimes literally overnight. Okay, so our guide for this whole deep dive is a really detailed academic study that actually compares Turkey's three most recent national development plans. This gives us a solid, data-driven way to see how the government's official strategy has been shifting around over the last 10 years. So here's the game plan. First, we'll get a handle on what these huge national blueprints even are. Then, we'll track this pretty dramatic shift from focusing on economic growth to prioritizing resilience. After that, we'll put some specific policies under the microscope, check out a report card on what they actually managed to get done, and wrap it all up by asking what this means for building the cities of the future. All right, let's jump right into part one, Turkey's urban blueprint. Now, these aren't just like vague suggestions. Think of these development plans as the official, high-level roadmaps for the entire country. They guide everything from the economy and social programs to environmental rules, and most importantly for us, how cities are supposed to be designed and run. This is the government's official vision on paper. We're going to be looking at three of these plans specifically. There's the 10th plan, which ran from 2014 to 2018, then the 11th, which took us up to 2023, and now the brand new 12th plan for the years ahead. But you see that event right there in the middle, the devastating Kahramanmaraş earthquakes in February 2023? That moment changes everything and casts a huge shadow over all the planning that came after. And that right there brings us to the core story of this whole explainer, this massive, pivotal shift from a mindset of growth to a new focus on resilience. In national planning, just like in your own life, sometimes one single event can force you to totally reevaluate everything you thought was important. Okay, just look at this table. It shows the shift so clearly it's kind of stunning. In the two earlier plans, regional development, which is basically about trying to even out the economy across the country, was priority number one. And disaster management, it was way, way down the list, ranked 9th and then 8th. But check out the 12th plan, the one written after the earthquakes. Disaster management skyrockets to the number one spot, while regional development just plummets all the way down to 7th. I mean, this isn't some small adjustment. It's a complete flip-flop of national priorities. And this quote from the paper really tells us why. It basically says that the new plan's whole focus on creating disaster-resilient living spaces is a direct, unfiltered reaction to the trauma and the lessons from those 2023 earthquakes. Suddenly, the abstract ideas got very, very real. Okay, so let's zoom in a little closer. In this next part, we're going to put these policies under the microscope and really compare the rise of disaster planning versus the fall of regional development. You can literally watch the policy get smarter and more detailed over time. The 10th plan was all about this big, high-level idea. Let's develop a national strategy. The 11th plan got more specific, saying, okay, now we need local risk reduction plans for every single province. And the new 12th plan, it's even more sophisticated. It's not just about making plans anymore. It's about actively monitoring them, updating them, and this is really important, focusing on the people who need the most help in a disaster, like the disabled, the elderly, and children. Now let's look at the other side of that coin, regional development. The 10th plan had a whopping 20 different policies, all aimed at making different regions more competitive. Fast forward to the 12th plan, and that number has been slashed to just 7. And even those 7 policies have been retooled to be more about post-disaster recovery than broad economic equality. The focus has completely shifted. So this brings up the million-dollar question, right? It's one thing to write a really nice, ambitious plan on paper. It's a whole other thing to actually make it happen in the real world. Do these big strategies actually lead to anything? And that's what we're going to look at now. It's time for the report card on how these plans actually performed. Let's look at the hits and the misses. Let's start with a pretty big miss. During the 11th plan, the government set this goal of building over 270,000 social housing units. So what was the reality? Well, according to the data in the study, they only finished 125,000. That's less than half the target, a major shortfall in a super critical area. And hey, remember that top priority from the first two plans, trying to close the regional income gap? The goal is pretty clear. Get the gap between the richest and poorest parts of the country to be less than 4 times. The reality? It went the other way. The gap actually got wider, hitting an estimated 4.3 times by 2023. So, another key goal that just didn't get met. But it wasn't all misses, not at all. When it came to really concrete physical infrastructure goals, the plans were often a lot more successful. For example, the goal of connecting 100% of the municipal population to a proper sewage network. That was a success. They hit the target, a clear win. So what does the final report card look like? Well, it's definitely a mixed bag. The research shows that about a quarter of the goals in the 11th plan were met or even exceeded, things like water services. A pretty big chunk, 45%, were partially met, but a significant 30%, and this includes major goals like social housing and closing that regional gap, fell well short of what was planned. This brings us to our final section, where we kind of zoom out and ask what all this means for building the cities of the future. Is the whole planning process just stuck in a constant state of reacting to things? And for the big takeaway, we can just look at the paper's own conclusion. The researchers argue that one of the biggest problems is a lack of continuity. Because the priorities shift so drastically from one plan to the next, it becomes almost impossible to achieve those big long-term goals. And that's the fundamental tension here, isn't it? On one hand, you want your plans to be responsive. When a disaster happens, you should adapt. But on the other hand, this constant reacting, this constant changing of priorities every few years, means a stable, long-term strategy never really gets a chance to take root and grow. And that leaves us with this final, really critical question. If your country's master plan is always being rewritten to fight the last war, can it ever truly build the kind of resilient, stable cities you need to face the inevitable crises that are still to come?